It was very dark. It was very cold. If I was in some sort of a life review, and everything that I was seeing that either had happened to me or I had done to another person, um, all of those insecurities that we all have, some core, wounds from childhood, um, all of them came to me at once. So it was an overwhelming fear of abandonment. It was rejection. It was everything that you have on a subconscious level that is not your true self, and is those false limiting beliefs that we pick up along our lines as we grow and we're conditioned and we're exposed to other people. I was in this warehouse full of them, and it was a very, very frightening, the most frightening experience that I could think of. And I thought to myself, I am in hell.
My guest today is Michelle Ledbetter, who is a hospice nurse, and she had a near death experience 6 years ago where she dipped her toe into hell. Since then, she has abilities she didn't have before, synchronicities within her hospice work, and she has had some out of body experiences, and we're going to dive into all of it. So, Michelle, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Lori, for having me. It's an honor to be here. Super excited about sharing, because I think when we share these things, we get to see our connection and we can kind of tap in and pick up things that might work for us. And if not, that's okay too. But yeah, I love that you have the sacred space for people to share this kind of stuff.
Well, I love this because this is the most fun part of my day having these conversations. I feel like the luckiest person to be able to do that.
Yeah, I bet. I bet you've heard some wonderful stories.
I have, and it's not very often that I have somebody who has a negative or a hellish kind of experience. So I think where I'd like to start with you today is, since your near death experience happened only 6 years ago, will you tell us a little bit about your background and maybe even your belief system before you went into this near death experience?
Absolutely. So as far as my background, I am a registered nurse. I'm a hospice nurse. But coming up through life, I had a lot of challenges. I think we're kind of, we decide to come into this world. We're super excited, and we know that we're going to need some contrast to be able to move through the journey of life and come back to the light that we are. And I think that truly that's everyone's purpose, is just to kind of wake up to who we are and come back to the source of who we are. I had, as far as my beliefs, I knew there was something greater, but I absolutely was not religious. I was anti-religion, because a lot of the trauma in my childhood experience came from people that claimed religion. And so it was an aversion to me, as far as if somebody were to say the word God. In fact, I've only been able to say it myself in the last few years, because the childhood trauma was significant. And so I had been raised in a Catholic church for a little while, and then a Baptist church, and I was exposed to a bunch of different philosophies, but it just didn't make sense to me that this loving God could also be so punishing and harsh. And so moving into this experience that I have had amazing, miraculous experiences prior. And I knew that there was some sort of divine guidance, but I couldn't really name it, and I wasn't going to call it God. So if I don't say God, or I say life force energy or universal love, or, the consciousness, I had to start looking at God not as an entity as I had before, who is outside of me judging me, but yet the energetic, um, the energy that is love and light that is within us. Now, I had no idea. I was living like most people do, trying to cross all those T's and dot those I's and go to college, and got married and was married for 18 years. And um, I ended up coming out of that marriage, making choices where I always felt like there was something missing. And so I was a seeker for a very long time. And I studied different religious organizations, Course in Miracles. And then, as far as the Bible, I stayed away from it until after my near-death experience. But I had heard some of the things that are said in the Bible, and they started to make sense to me after I went through this. Um, so I went into it as a human being who was going through the grind of life, trying to receive the validation from outside to give myself worth, knowing that there was something missing inside of me and I could never put my finger on it. I searched for love in every nook and cranny. And often there have been times that I searched for it in places that really just brought me to a place of tore my family apart, all those horrible things that you hear about people, the things that they might do. I was that person. And so in a way I felt flawed. I was wondering what was wrong with me because I couldn't seem to find this joy that people say is out there, nor did I necessarily see anybody else that I could mimic. I didn't have, in my community, in my upbringing, that wasn't, I had never really seen anybody that was living in pure joy and bliss and living heaven on earth, if you will. So when I went into my experience, I was traveling at the time. I took a traveling assignment and I was moving from Montana trying to get to Texas. I was trying to outrun a storm and I had been on the road for a long day. The storm winds were terrible and I just kept pushing through like I normally do. Got to get to my next destination. And I ended up having a car accident. And the I had when I was on my assignment, I had dealt with drugs and addiction and putting stuff in my body to numb the feeling that of you know lack of love that I was looking for. I was creating a reality that was just not. It's like there's got to be more to life than this. And I was doing the grind. And if you saw me from the outside, you'd say, she got it together. You wouldn't know that the struggle was going on inside. And I think a lot of us present like that because we want to be so called normal, right? Or accepted and validated and know that our life had meaning. So I was doing what a lot of people do. And I continued to search for that. But as I'm sorry, I'm losing track here. So you might have to re-guide me. I did have a closed head injury as well, a traumatic brain injury, and sometimes I lose my focus. So if you need to redirect me. But the day of my accident, I had stopped abruptly taking Xanax. Um, I ran out of it, my prescription because I was out of state. And this was about 4 days after. I'm a nurse. I did not even know that there was going to be an issue with me not having it. Come to find out, about 3 years later, I ended up having a seizure. And I was feeling off the entire day and I was just blazing past it like I always do, trying to push past it, not letting life guide me because there were so many signs that I needed to stop, but I just kept barreling through. Um, so when I had the accident, I drove off an incline and my car came down and I broke my back and had a traumatic brain injury. When I was found, I there in in retrospect, and I actually just discovered this, as I said, things are constantly unfolding for me. So um, there was a profound peace where there should have been horrific fear. Um, and I never even noticed that peace and that love of God and that presence because I was so focused on what happened when I went into surgery, where I thought I was in hell. So, as I was unwinding this, it's still 2 years after my accident. I was still dipping into alcohol. I was still trying to numb. And I got to a point where it's like something has to give. I lost every bit of my money. I lost my job. I lost my best friend after this accident. And it was like I was at the absolute lowest low. I didn't have a job. And so I had to sit with myself. I didn't have any extra money to go anywhere, no gas money, that sort of thing. But I sat with myself and it was like, okay, I am open to receive and I am willing to, if all things are happening for the greater good, I am open to see what the experience was trying to teach me. So the actual experience, again, they found me, they took me to the hospital. There was just a great sense of peace. I was not afraid. I was traveling with my little dog. And when I went in, the when I did feel fear, it was when they said they might have to impound my dog. So it was that separation right there. Like, what are they going to do? I was by myself with my dog, and this nurse came and she said, "Don't worry about it, honey. I've got your dog. When I get off, I'm going to take your dog home with me." And I just felt this overwhelming love from a complete stranger. And I saw the divinity in a person at that point. And then I started to see it in everyone that was helping me. It was amazing. I had to have emergency surgery. Excuse me. Um, so the surgeon came in and was explaining that, we needed to do it tonight. And he had already done like 10 surgeries and we were moving into a new day. This was February 14th now. I had the accident on the 13th in the evening, and the 14th February. Um, I liken it to, it was the most expensive Valentine's Day ever, where I got screwed back together. And my accident was in Loveland, Colorado. So, like, right? You start to look at those things like that. But um, he told me he had to do the surgery, and I said, okay, just make sure that you've had your coffee and you're feeling good, because I'm the last one on the list, and I hope you're good to go. I'm okay if you go home and take a nap. If we have to go, we have to go. So I went into surgery, and that's when after they put me to sleep, I was, still able to communicate. And again, I had this overwhelming sense of peace, and I did not even recognize it, because the fear of what I experienced during my surgery and in recovery in ICU um, presented itself with me in a warehouse setting. It was very dark. It was very cold. Um, and if I was in some sort of a life review, and everything that I was seeing that either had happened to me or I had done to another person, um, all of those insecurities that we all have, some core, wounds from childhood, um, all of them came to me at once. So it was an overwhelming fear of abandonment. It was rejection. It was everything that you have on a subconscious level that is not your true self, and is those false limiting beliefs that we pick up along our lines as we grow and we're conditioned and we're exposed to other people. I was in this warehouse full of them, and it was a very, very frightening, the most frightening experience that I could think of. And I thought to myself, I am in hell. I saw people suffering. I had an HIV patient in my life, maybe 5 years prior. He was present in this, and he was struggling. And so, my heart was hurting for him. There was one scene where my daughters came in and then they left and the door shut behind them, and I could see them leaving me, but I could not understand why they were leaving me, that fear of abandonment in this warehouse. And it was warm and it was dark, and it it was just a very frightening, frightening place. I have never been so scared in my life. And when I looked up, the the tiles on this roof started to lift. And I was so afraid. I was so stuck in my ego mind of fear and all those false limiting beliefs that I had learned throughout my childhood and into my adulthood, that I couldn't look. I just was like, when I saw the light coming, I thought, oh my gosh, this is lava and I am going to burn in hell. And I just like wrapped my head and bent over, and I'm like, I hope it doesn't hurt. It was it extended into that, where I was in ICU for days, and there was just a mind full of fear, of regret, of abandonment. And when you're most scared, it was that intensified. When I came out of it, I didn't tell anybody, because of course I don't want anybody to know that I went to hell, right? We don't want anybody to know we got anything in there that might cause us to go to hell. So I didn't share it for a very long time. And during that 2 year period, I still was trying to numb myself so I wouldn't have to look at it. I was still trying to get through life and do be the one that was leading life, and I was failing miserably. I had $8 in my bank account, and it was just, I was at the very bottom of the barrel. So when I got to that place and I had nothing to do but sit here and sit with myself, I was like, I am open to receive whatever it is I need to know about what that was trying to teach me. And as soon as I said that, things started coming to me. The messages that I would get about the experience was, I think a lot of people, being a hospice nurse, I see it a lot of times as we start through our life review. There are things that we believe are attached to our identity. And as far as, those feelings of abandonment and those things that become our core issues that prevent us from being our best self in this life. As people are moving through that, there's agitation, and it can be uncomfortable for the person going through it and the person watching it. I believe that people are kind of going through this ego mind, false limiting beliefs, things that are taught to us that are not our true self, that we buy into as a society that was handed down from, whether you believe it was Adam and Eve, the fall of grace, the separation from life source energy, the separation from God. And we fall into that, and then we start to drive our lives, and we do a pretty miserable job at it. However, if you look back through your life, you can see that all of those things that happened were life trying to show you that if you're in those negative emotions, fear, abandonment, anything that's on that low vibration, it's life asking you and telling you, look, sister, you're not looking at it the right way. If you could just shift your lens and look at this from the truth of what it truly is, dig down, figure out where those blocks and barriers came from, and dive into it deep. The beauty on the backside of it is you recognize those are things that I picked up from other people. That's not the true essence of who I am. That's not who I am as an individual, but we sometimes get so identified with those things because everybody's doing the same thing we are, right? And so we get lost. We don't know. Things distract us from our core. We aren't taught to look within. In all my religious upbringings, it was always looking outside for that, uh, for Jesus being outside, or for, if you're going to a Catholic church, to go to the priest. And the connection is lost, and we don't know that we have the actual power within us, that we are divinely connected, and we are an extension of life source energy. We are an extension of that. And that is pure love. I believe the contrast of such extreme in my life, as far as child molestation, brought up by a father who was considered a narcissist, but bless his heart, he was just disconnected and trying to do his thing. Those all of those things that I carried with me and owned as who I was completely blocking me and preventing me from being the best version of who I was. I didn't even necessarily know what true love was until I went through this. I thought it was more of an engagement and an exchange that you have with somebody, but not that loving somebody unconditionally just because of the role that they're playing in your life. Um, I recognize now, with the receiving of information that I have obtained, is that life is happening for us, not to us. And so if we ever find ourselves in any situation where we are on a low vibration scale, that is the wound within us that is fighting back to defend our stance in this life. And if we can be willing to dig a little deeper and know that if we are feeling anything that's other than love and joy, there's your opportunity right there. There's the gift. So of course, I didn't know any of this as I was moving through. You don't know until you know. But once you recognize that life is truly happening to help you release all of those blocks and barriers that we put in front of ourselves to protect ourselves, it works for a little while, but then it becomes a barrier that we can't be vulnerable and let those walls down and live from a heart space instead of from our ego mind of trying to grind and do that sort of thing. So the biggest takeaway is, first of all, we are worthy and valuable just because we are here doing this thing called life. And we are connected to the source that created us every moment, from now through eternity. You cannot be separated from that. Um, I like to use the analogy that God is to man like the ocean is to a fish. It's all encompassing. And so now that I see it that way, now that I see God as the life force energy around me that's trying to guide me to be the best version of myself, those things that come up, whether it's a disagreement with a peer, say, where before I felt like I had to defend my stance, I needed to be heard. Those are protection modes, right? To show our value and our worth. Um, I realized that's coming out of me. If I have to defend, if that's my stance, there's something within me that makes me feel like I have to do that. Where did that come from? So then you go back through the, your childhood, and where did you pick up that that you have to prove your existence or your worth and your value? So there was a lot of diving into, show me what this is trying to teach me, show me what this emotion is trying to teach me, show me what all of that fear in my altered reality perception was trying to show me. And it was just trying to show me that's not the truth of who you are. And the truth is the feeling that I had when I saw the divinity in that nurse who helped me with my dog. The truth is the love and the engagement that you have with people. The truth is that love that you can share with another human being. And that is who we are. And so if we can move from that space, move into that space, the heart space, and let life flow through us, it's amazing where it will take you. But yeah, I had to dip my toe into hell, look at it and face it. And once I did, and I realized on the other side of that was the relief, because this was all just what we put up to help us get through what we think we need to do. So that I feel like I'm not doing sequentially well in how I'm trying to explain this, but the lesson is what I want people to hear, that we are all divine beings, and that our life is meant to be joyful. And if we can step into the flow of life and have faith and know that if something comes around the corner and catches us off guard, that's an opportunity for us to look at the connection with ourself, our highest self, and see if we can hold that high vibration. And I'll be darned, you can do it. You can do it. It's not that I don't get triggered. Those triggers are our gift. They're the little God sign that's saying you're looking at it the wrong way. Um, when when I do get triggered, I'm able to flip it around pretty quick, and I can see the hurt in the other person, and I can own my stuff and not project onto them. And I can see their stuff that they might be trying to project on me, but I no longer have any animosity because we're the same. I've been there. I do that as well. I see that it's a wound that is causing people to react instead of respond. So that has been the greatest gift of getting to know who I am and knowing that life is working for me, that I am not separate from God, that I am an extension of Him. And through us and through our life experience, God is experiencing it with us, right? So, even in the most difficult things, I was sharing with you about my molestation and as a child, and it's hard for me to speak it because it was something that I denied for a long time. I know it was back there, but I didn't know the significance of how it distorted my connection with people, how it distorted my view on life until just recently, actually. But once I saw that, I also saw that the person that did that to me had significant wound and did what they did as a way of trying to help themselves, which is distorted as it is. It's not coming from the place of who they truly are. They're disconnected from their source. They've had hard life. They've 99% of people that have been molested molest themselves. And so it just becomes this cycle. But it freed me to see this as another human being who has their own life story that has made poor choices. I made poor choices too. And no, I no longer have a need to hold anything over anybody. I'm actually grateful for those people because without those things, I wouldn't necessarily see how beautiful life is. And I don't think I would have been connected to truly who I am. So,
Wow.
yeah, I know I'm babbling.
Amazing. This is wonderful. I love this. I have so many questions for you. But the
Okay,
first one,
listen,
the first thing I want to say is actually a comment. You are the second person today to say these things are happening for me and not to me.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
that's the second one.
it is my that is how I also view things.
Uh-huh.
It is not like you said, you do get triggered and you get pulled into forgetting them. But when you can get to the point where these things happen, and instead of getting mad or triggered emotionally, and you wonder, what is it about this? Why is this happening for me? I know I planned it. I know there's a reason behind it. I can't get mad at it right now because I can't see the reason why, but it does bring back a little bit more joy and more love into your life when you can get there. And I'm not saying like this is the ultimate goal, because for the everybody watching, it's not an easy thing sometimes when
Oh, it's not.
that, like,
Mhm.
I lost my dog. I lost my dog 4 weeks ago, and she was my person.
I'm sorry. They are your person.
and and I had her for almost 16 years, which is a really long time. And I know that we planned this together, and they don't always get to stay. And I know there was going to be a time where there's a loss, and I'm just trying to figure out like why now, and what's the beauty and the gift in it happening now, because I know that there is one. But when it doesn't take the sadness away, because you still physically miss that person, or you physically miss something in your life that is not anymore, or a relationship or whatever it is, but you do begin to heal much more quickly when you can get to that point where you can say, this is happening for me, like I designed this.
Yeah. And can I share something with you about
Please. Yeah.
so what's your dog's name?
Storm.
Storm. So the connection that you were talking about, right? That is truly what life is about.
Mhm.
That is eternal.
Yes.
Although physical, there's a saying that's nothing can be created or destroyed. It only changes form. And so in the form, we bond and we make those connections. But when the soul leaves the form, the physical form, it's an expansion, it's a evolution, and you can't be disconnected from it. The thing that we don't necessarily do is see the communication that still continues because we get lost in our sorrow and missing, and we don't recognize that we're still connected. We are so connected. And so when you step into that and know that there's no way you can undo that connection, then you will start to see the signs of
Yeah, I
storm
got a sign.
that
I
are
got a
right
sign
there.
today.
Yes.
I
And
did. I
it's,
got a really cool sign. I'll share it really quick, because the one of the most popular videos on my channel is about signs and synchronicities. I wrote a book called Signs Surround You, Love Never Dies. And in that, I get lots of signs that I share. But my dog Storm having passed 4 weeks ago today, I had a colleague at work in my corporate job who helped me and let one of our shared consultants work with me today with a client instead of going to a meeting that they had scheduled. And so I called him to thank him for that. And I remembered that he was using this AI tool, and I asked him about it, and he's like, "Oh, I found an even better tool. It's called Storm."
ah,
And I was like, "What the heck? I know
I
now why
know.
all of that happened. I know why there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of things that
Yeah.
had to happen." And like, I could have written him a note, and I could have just sent him an email, "Oh, thank you." And he was green and I was green, and I called him and he answered. And so it was just like, what a gift, right?
What a gift.
What a
Yeah.
gift. What a
And
gift.
when you, it's so, I know I'm not supposed to cuss, but it's like you can't make that S up. You can't make
You
it
can
up.
say
Like
it. You can say it. We can't make
I
that
got
shit up.
bleeped out in another video that I did, and then the people were saying, "I wish you wouldn't bleep." Yeah, so you can't make that shit up. When you start to see the serendipity and the sequencing, you know that there is something more going on here, and you tap into that. And life is so fun because you start looking for it, and it
Yeah.
pops up all over the place. It's
Yeah, and
so
we're going to
fun.
come back to the hospice nurse part of this, because I know that these things opened up even more after your near-death experience. But I have some actual questions about the near-death experience. So I don't know
Yes.
if you are aware of this, but the whole reason I began interviewing people who had had near-death experiences is because of life reviews. They're not super common. I would say maybe 20%, maybe 25% of people who have a near-death experience have a life review. And the reason that I'm so fascinated and that I feel so compelled to share the life review story is because I feel like it has the most impact on someone to understand how you affect another, the ultimate connection that we all are to one another, and the ripple effect that we have on the world. And it makes you look at your life differently after you really understand how these work. So yours is a little different. And it's interesting to me that you actually said that you dipped your toe in hell, and that's how I introduced you. But I'm going to say to you, I don't actually think your life review was, and I wasn't there, but to me, it doesn't seem like it was a hellish experience where I was thinking you went into a place of hell, but I could understand how your parameters that you put on the life that you had before, especially coming from Baptist church, which I also was a part of for several years. They talk about hell, they talk about the wrath of God, and you kind of get that into the vernacular and into your belief system. And of course, I would see, so we'll dive into that a little bit more, but I want to talk a little bit more specifics about this life review and what it was like. So I've interviewed lots of people who have had these. Did you have screens around you? What was it? How did this appear to you, Michelle, having in this warehouse this life review?
So it was like a segment of film, um, of, seeing where, again, the traumas that I had gone through and being there, reliving it. But all of them, it was like all of them, all the things I had done, all the things that I felt had been done to me, all of that fear and emotion that was the significant part. But I love that you said, eh, what I believe now is that hell is a state of mind. And
Yes.
so many people are living in hell and they don't actually know it. And so that's what it showed me. It's like, this is what hell is. It was very hellish to me. Um, it was like, if I could have thought of anything, being burned alive while I'm watching all those stuff that I had done and had been done to me and feeling it on such an intense level, that was my hell.
I
Um,
totally agree. And I please,
yeah,
hopefully you understand and people watching understand. I'm not trying to take anything away by saying
no,
it wasn't hellish in the way I was thinking of it, but I understand how it would have felt that way. So
right.
you're seeing these scenes. A lot of people who have life reviews talk about like they're all happening at once. Did it feel that way also to
It
you?
did. Yeah. Time is so elusive in this. And so I can't tell you where this whole thing started as far as like what stage of my going to sleep versus me getting out of ICU. I can't tell you. It, it's all flowing kind of at the same time. And there are moments where I had lucidity, um, but it would still blur reality. So there was a point where um, I was acting out my fears. So they had to have somebody sit and watch me for safety because I was trying to
What do you
get out
mean?
of
What do
the
you mean?
bed.
Like you were out while you were in this state?
Yes.
So call
So,
it a coma, call it a what unconsciousness. You were
yes,
actually like flailing around?
yes. I was acting out. So I was trying to get out of the bed. I like everything I was feeling, the fear, like I needed to get out. It was actually happening in my physical body. So, although I was in a different space, I was, in my hell, people could see what was going on because I was trying to get out of bed and I just had back surgery. I was like, you guys got to get me out of here. And so they had physical people watching me. Um, and I,
Interesting. I've never heard anything like this before.
yeah. And so when I saw the lady that was sitting with me, she was an African American lady. I saw her as an African American lady. I but all of a sudden she turned into my Caucasian sister. And I was like, why won't you help me? So I am like, they're looking at me and now I can see again, I can see it because I went through it. I can see how when people are acting out or having what we call end of life terminal agitation, how it looks to the person that is in this reality watching this person misbehaving, not having any clue what's going on within the person. So but so things, it was a very, like, again, time and where reality stopped and then where it got, where it blurred. It was I don't even really know how to explain that. um there were multiple things that I saw. There were multiple things that, it was like, I'm looking at my sister now, although I know it's not my sister, but it is my sister. I'm like, why won't you help me? And she's thinking, get back in the bed. You keep setting the alarm off. But you got to help. I wanted to help to get out of the hell that I was in, but I couldn't express it to the person that was sitting there watching me. Um, so yeah,
Are these
it was.
experiences as real now as they were when they happened, or did they fade over time?
Oh no, it is so vivid. The vividness of the smell, the colors, where things are placed, the feelings, again, for me, were huge. It is more vivid than reality, if that makes sense.
It does
Um,
make sense because I've heard it over and over and over again. And this is the delineation between a near death experience and a dream.
yeah,
Everybody has had the experience where they have had a very, very vivid dream that was so real it woke them up. And then within an hour, they can barely connect to what exactly happened and they start to fade.
right.
These near death
Never
experiences don't
doesn't
work
fade.
that way. They're still as clear. So, because of that, and I asked you that for a very specific reason, can you pick a scene that you can remember that's shareable of something that you went through and how you relived it from your aspect and their aspect and how that was so that people can really understand what this means? Because I do believe that every single person who lives a human incarnation will have a life review at the end of this incarnation. And some of you are having it as a near death experience and coming back, but I think we all will have this, a review of what we just lived, what we just did.
Yeah. Yeah. So probably the most significant one, my major core wound, which I've discovered, is abandonment. I and again, I was raised by a father without a mother for the first 7 years of my life. And the scene that played for that just took me by the heart. I saw it from both sides. So from my side, I'm standing in the warehouse, and my daughters come behind me, and in my mind I'm thinking that I'm taking them to show them something. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're with each other. And when I saw the person that I knew that was HIV positive struggling and suffering, my thought went, we've got to find his partner. So I turned to look for my children to say, let's go. And they blankly looked at me like, no, we're not interested in you. We're not interested in what you're doing. And they turned and walked away. And so I felt the pang of being abandoned and seeing them walk away. And there was nothing I could do. I couldn't get to them once they shut the door because I couldn't get the door open. Then I see how my leaving the marriage when my children were 16 and, or 14 and 6, how my perceived selfishness to find joy in life um, left the wound of abandonment on my children. And so I felt it from their perspective. There was a lot of hurt by some of the things that I did and I saw it from their side. When I saw it from their side, because when you're doing something like I'm traveling and I'm running marathons and I'm getting awards and I'm in my mind, I'm trying to show them you can be anything you want to be. Underneath, I'm running and still looking for validation and doing all this crazy stuff, but I'm righteous in my mind. I was shown that their view of it was I left them. They weren't important enough to go with me. They but I never that was never my intention. But That's how they perceived it. And they have wounds from what I did. So that's when I was able to recognize that, like with my father, he was very abusive and he was, again, what they call a narcissist. And I was able to see his life before and the trauma he went through and the reason that he was who he was and presented himself as something that he wasn't and was constantly lying and manipulating and you never knew where he was coming from that was his protection because he couldn't he was so disconnected from himself that so I saw and I felt it on his side. And I would see how I was abused physically, rejected, not felt, love was not something that was shown in my family. Then I would see it from my side. So there were with my ex-husband, the same sort of thing. I was, I could see where I felt betrayed by him, but in the same breath, I saw the betrayal that that he saw. So essentially, it was like this mirror, if you will, reflecting back all those negative emotions. Um, so I was seeing each side of it in the worst sort of way, if that makes sense. And the emotion of being in that is suffocating. Is suffocating. Yeah.
Which would feel like
And
that
I wanted
hell.
out.
Yeah.
What?
That would
Yeah.
feel like that hell that you wanted out.
Yes, I wanted it was like I can't take any more of this. This is the worst. There's just too much sadness and grief and heartache and oh my, it was awful. It was awful. And I was fighting to get out. Um
Well, I want
so
to thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to actually share that because those are very personal things that you experienced. So I'm curious when you came back at the point in time, because you're telling this publicly now, I know it was 6 years ago. Did you have a chance to talk to your children about what you experienced from their side to get any confirmation that that was true or untrue?
yes, there have been conversations with my especially my youngest daughter. We have more of we're able to have more of a dialogue. Um and yes, they felt very much left by what I did. They didn't see it from my perspective of, but mom's so great and she's doing so many great things and showing us how to be strong. They saw it as like, what's wrong with me that mom would choose that over us?
So
Um,
was that helpful for you, not just from the aspect of understanding that that's how they felt, but also a confirmation of what you saw? Because I don't feel like from what you described, you were actually aware of that before that
I
experience.
was not aware of that. Our the way we view the world, we're always going to try and make ourselves right. And so I absolutely did not see that like that. If I had known that what I was doing was affecting them like that, I would have absolutely done something different. But I wasn't capable of seeing it. Like I was so caught up in, again, the grind of life and doing what I thought I was supposed to do, to say that my life mattered, that I was barreling through and I was causing a lot of harm. Now I knew that, that divorce breaks families and that sort of thing. But I also thought and justified, if I stay in this, I'm going to drink myself to oblivion and you won't have a mom. So, like you justify why you're not looking at your own shit, um, to make yourself feel okay about what you're doing. And all the while you're just trying to find that joy and love.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting. All
yeah,
right, I'm gonna dig in on a different level in a different way with the life review. And I'm gonna ask, I know that this was a much more negative than positive experience, but did you in that place also see some positive things or things that you did from love from that perspective in the life review?
I did not see that until after. I didn't see it until my healing process. So
Do you want
because
to
again,
explain one that you uncovered?
um, yeah. So I I started to give money and have little care packages in my car for people that are on the side of the road. And I didn't share it publicly with people, but one time I had an extra $20 and there was a gentleman sitting at a convenience store with his dog, and I gave him that money in a place of totally releasing it. Whatever he chose to do with it, it was coming from love. If he could see the love in it, hopefully he would be able to pay that forward. So there was a little bit of an attachment there, I guess, still. But that was those are the moments that matter way more than the distorted things that happen over here, if that makes sense.
It
So
makes
when
so much
truly
sense.
acting from that heart space with no real significant attachment, and you're giving from the soul of who you are and the love of who you are, that is like it's drug good. You know what I mean? It's just
Right.
it's good stuff. There is no drug that can that that measures up to that. I didn't know how important that was though until I started to sit with it and see all of, those good things that I've done. Um, that one I didn't even, I didn't necessarily, I knew that my intention was good. Um, I don't know what he did with that money, but at that point it didn't matter. And I want to share, when I say life is happening for you as an individual, um, life really is all about you. And sometimes when I've said that before, people think of that narcissistic, oh, oh, it's all about you. But it's all about you, in that the things that are coming at you, the things that you do, the kindness that you extend, the kindness that is extended you, the it, you're getting guidance in which direction feels better, which direction, when I did give that and I saw that in my mind's eye, and I saw the joy that it gave me, and I saw the joy they get, you see their eyes light up, and whether it's for their drugs or whatever, it didn't matter, because it was coming from a place of purity. um Now I I try to stay in that space. So thank you for acknowledging the vulnerability. I would have never told you any of that shit because I was so ashamed. There's a lot of shame that goes around it, right? And
Of
I think that's why we have
course.
a hard time looking at it. But now that I've opened up and I have nothing to hide, and I recognize that the more I am authentic and true and not trying to bullshit people about how amazing I am and tell them my truth of the boo-boos that I've made and how I've come to see it differently, that hopefully the people, that they want to be honest with themselves, they can see the similar thing, and connect to this way of seeing life, because I know everybody goes through it.
Yeah.
Everybody
And
has
that's
core
why this is so
boo-boos.
helpful, Michelle. I don't even know over time, because these videos live in perpetuity, how many people will see that, connect, and it will open up something in them. It will free something in them because you had the courage to share something vulnerable. So I thank you for doing
Yeah.
that. That's amazing. So you described yourself in the beginning as being anti-religious. And then you had this experience that felt a little bit hellish. So, how have your beliefs changed since before and during that experience to now? How would you describe your beliefs?
I am um I am a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yay!
Uh yeah. And um and I am not into organized religion. I think that it can be separating in a lot of ways, just like it was for me. It actually distracted me from myself. Um, but I am very connected to God, life force energy, that energy that is flowing through us that wants us to become the best, most authentic version of ourselves. So I I don't claim a religion. I claim my connection and spirituality.
When you were explaining that warehouse to us and you talked about looking up at the roof and seeing the roof start to lift in the light, you reminded me a lot of the experience that Dr. Eben Alexander had. He was a neurosurgeon, he developed meningitis, and he was an atheist, and he believed that when you died that was it and nothing else happened. And so when he died, he was in a space of complete darkness with a sound of what he described as like an anvil hitting steel over and over again in a very monotonous way, going into eons and eons. And it was the nothingness that he felt the prison of his mind had created, kind of like what you talked about, that hellish experience being the prison of the fear that you would experience and taken into your body. And he had one thought, which was, at some point in time, is this all there is? And a
Yes.
light, he saw it in the distance, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and opened up into heaven. I'm sure you've had a lot of time to think about this. Have you wondered, had you not looked away and had you focused on what was happening on the roof, do you think that scene in the warehouse could have possibly changed? And this is just speculation.
Yes. In hindsight, I believe it was the light source energy, God, that was trying to lift the tiles to show me, look, what you're doing down here in that ego separated mind from who I am, and what you're seeing is the illusion. And I believe that if I would have, I don't know if I would have again, it wasn't a near death, but I don't know what would have happened if I would have looked up. I was just so afraid. And in that, I think a lot of people are afraid to step into their faith that life is going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to. So again, it's that fear versus love. I was too afraid to look at the light and see what at that point. I'm so grateful that since that time, and when I finally released myself to all there's got to be more to this than this, like that, there's got to be something more. And I'm willing, do whatever, like, what is the next thing? Or take me out because I've already been to hell. Like, I made it. So, like, I can go there again if we have to, but I really don't want to. So, when I surrendered to life and asked life to start showing me what is all of this about, there's got to be, it was truly to come back to who you are and remember your worth and value without anything outside of you. You don't need anybody to tell you that.
So you
It's,
have this near death experience in this accident, you recover and you go back to your job as a hospice nurse, and then you begin seeing all the miracles. So will you share some of them that you've experienced that you want people to know about?
well, so when after my accident, I pushed myself to get back to work. I tried to go back too quick. I ended up getting fired from a job that I absolutely loved. And so this was kind of like the downward spiral for those 2 years. And in retrospect, it was the greatest, all of it has been the greatest gift ever. The miracle started happening when I was with my best friend, Brett. In this 2 year period, it really started to like show itself to me. I had no job. I was caring for him. And that was one of those life signs that I kept hearing. You need to stay with your friend Britt. I don't care if don't have a job. This is where you're supposed to be. So I said, okay, if that's what you're asking me to do, I'm gonna step out on this faith. What's the worst thing that can happen? And the miracle that came from that is he was taken to hospice with OG. I believe he was given 3 days to live. And he said he wanted to go home. I got him out of the hospice house, brought him home, and he was with me for another 16 months. And in that
Whoa.
16 months, it was a true miracle. In that 16 months, what this gentleman showed me was the unconditional love I had been looking for the whole time. There was no sexual energy whatsoever, which, a lot of times we convolute love with that. It was pure acceptance and loving somebody just for being in your journey. And so I started to see, like, there, you can't explain. The doctor even said, I can smell the blood on you, which is a horrible thing to say. You have 3 days. And that's when he's like, I got to get out of here, because he was in the hospital for 3 months and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And it just spontaneously stopped. And he told me that it happened when they were transferring him from the hospital to the Big Ben hospice house to die. In that transition, he knew that God came in and healed him. And he knew, I think that, our connection and what happened in those last 16 months together, the growth, the awareness, it just started to blossom. It all started to open up. And so that was the first miracle. I was very aware when he was passing, where before, like if I had a family member, I'd want to, take a Ativan or whatever to not have to feel the pain of it. I was very good at numbing myself, because I didn't like to sit in uncomfortableness. With him, I was like, I am going to be completely aware of what's happening as the soul leaves the body, so I can experience this. So as he was moving into that transition, he went through a little bit of that fear, that life review. I held his hand. I said, it's okay. It's like kind of birthing into a new realm. It's going to be a little bumpy as we go through that life review. But on the backside of this, you're going to see the whole thing and go, oh my gosh, that was what that was. That was just my own mind, ego, barrier, belief I put in front of me that caused me to behave that way. Or well, I did, you get to see it for the truth of what it is. I truly believe that once you transcend into the non-physical, so that was an absolute miracle that he made it that long. The miracles that happened at this serendipities, I was able to take him on a trip to a place he had never been. And I'd always said to him, now I want, if there is a connection between me and my physical, because we know you're going to non-physical, I need you to come and tell me some way, somehow. So I'm going to share this story with you real
Oh
quick.
my gosh, I'm so excited to hear this.
Yeah. And so he was, he was like, okay, man, if I can do it, I'll see what I can do. So when he, towards the end of his life, I was driving to go get him some medication at the pharmacy, and I live out in the country, and I'm on a back country road, and I see this little flicker in my front left light, and it stayed with me and looked like a little angel. And it like iridescent, and it just was the coolest thing. And it caught my attention. I thought, what in the heck is that thing? Like, what is it? So when I got back to the house, I was sharing it with him. I was like, I'm driving down the road, something gets in my light. It looks like an angel. And he said, oh yeah, that's an angel moth. I said, angel moth? What are you talking about? He's like, those moths that are iridescent. And I was like, I didn't know what it was. So I look it up. It's actually called a lunar moth. I look it up. It's a big green moth, right? So we had that conversation. I was like, well, it was the coolest thing ever. It stayed there with my light. It was glittering like a little fairy. And he's like, yeah, that's an angel moth. So after he passed, there was still a couple more places that he didn't get to go. So I took his ashes in his ash box and I strapped him in the seat, and we went on a little joyride. And I was like, okay, man, you're going to show me, right? Show me our connection. It was a beautiful journey. I took him to the mountains. I sprinkled him in the rivers. I threw him in the breweries that he wanted to go. We had the best time, but nothing real, concrete to say that he's still connected. So I drive home. I'm still feeling pretty good because I was all, into our memories and what I had learned. And I go to open the door. It's dark. And, when you open the door, the light will shine down. Typically, I'll just barrel out. Again, I live in the woods. And so I open the door, and there's this perfectly intact skeleton of a lunar moth.
Whoa. Wow.
And it's like, that's when it was like, that's it. That we were the only two that had that conversation. That fact that this thing is intact in the woods where I have bears that sometimes sit out there is like, you can't make that shit up, right? You can't make it up. And so that connection, it was like, of course. And I felt it in every being when I picked him up. It was like, this is what you asked for. I'm right here. And it was just like, holy cow. And since then, those, those serendipities, those things that happen, he's come to me in other ways. I'll say, I need to feel your presence. And one time I was saying, I need to feel your presence. I had never acknowledged yellowbirds in my area. I never saw a yellowbird in my area. And I said, okay, so I tested him, tested him. And I said, okay, give me a yellowbird. If this is really real, because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, no way, that didn't just happen. And this is months, this is maybe even a year or two later. This is later after you passed. And so I was like, okay, let's test this. So I sat in my little chair and I'm waiting to see if there's any yellow bird. I see a yellow butterfly and I was like, okay, I'll take it. Right. It's like, okay, it was yellow. Good job. So I kind of leave it at that. No yellow bird. I go to work, come back the next day, flying in the door, going to feed my animals. And I hear this knocking. I live in an RV and there's a ladder that goes up and down this big window. I hear this knocking and there's a freaking yellow bird, like, and on the staircase. So I grab my video and I get a video of it. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you for letting me see that. But it's like when you put your intention and your energy into something, even when you're testing, if you're open to, I couldn't have missed that one though, but like if you're open to receive, I think it's been happening always, but now I'm just tapped into it, right? Now I
Yes.
see it all the time. So just like Storm, like once you tap into it, you're going to see it everywhere. It's just like, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that
So
you share that because I always say your synchronicities confirm my synchronicities because I think that that's what we do for each other. So I'll share a quick
absolutely.
story that's kind of
Yeah.
fun about my passed away loved one, Mark. So he had been gone, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe less than that. And I was just really missing him and thinking about him. And shortly after he died, I had gone to a medium, and the medium said through Mark, I'm not going to be sharing any dumb signs like cardinals or doves. And then she said he got this kind of like a mischievous grin on his face, and he said, how about beavers? I'll send you beavers as signs. And it was tongue in cheek because he was just a smart aleck, right? So this particular day I was on this walk around these ponds and I said, I really miss you. I really wish I could hear from you. Like I need some kind of a sign. And a song came on my music that was playing, and the lyric I love you happened at the same time a beaver came up out of the water and flapped its tail on the pond. So that was like just one teeny tiny example. And
Yeah.
when I moved from Illinois to Arizona, I was lamenting to my daughter about how I was probably never going to see beavers as signs again because it's not like they're around here. And the very first week that I am in this house, I'm ripping things apart. I'm doing construction on it. And I go to Home Depot and I have to return something and I'm standing in line and the person in front of me has a sweatshirt with a big beaver on the back of it. So
Of
he
course.
finds it. So he was like, ha, like you
Yeah.
might not get him the way you were getting him before, but I'm still going to send
Yeah.
him to you. He even sent me one
Absolutely.
time a beaver license plate that was for 2 seconds beside a license plate that said soulmate while I was
Yeah.
telling a story to my sister about him. So they will pull out all the stops, but you do have to be open to it. You
Yes.
also sometimes when they're new to you can ask for them, and it may
Mhm.
not happen to your point the same moment. Like I was lucky in air quotes that happened at that moment. You didn't get yours with the yellow bird for a couple of days, but still you just have to be open and they will prove it to you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I love connecting with people that actually see that. They can actually see the divinity in all things that are happening. I've got a couple of girlfriends that you can, they are seeing how their things are unfolding. And I get so excited when I see other people knowing it, seeing it, and you
Yes.
can't make it up. You
Because
can't make it
again,
up.
your synchronicities confirm my synchronicities. They
Yeah,
really do. That's how
absolutely.
this stuff works.
I know. Yeah, we are all here to mirror each other. We
Absolutely.
are all connected in that way. And even your worst enemy is your greatest gift and your best teacher when you can start seeing it like that, right? And it moves you into a place of just love and life. Like now that I've figured it out, I hope I get to stay in this realm because it's fun. That's
Yeah,
really a lot of
it
fun.
is fun. Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned the word connection. So, Michelle, I'm going to ask you like people that are watching, they often want to connect with the guests. And is there any way that people can connect with you?
Absolutely. Through my email, if you have that. And also on Facebook. I'm on Facebook if somebody wants to reach out. And it's Michelle Ledbetter, and then there's Candence in parentheses. Yeah, so if somebody would like to reach out, that would be great. And I also want to share, I have learned so much about my own experience just since I started sharing my story and reaching, like it took me a while to get here, but the validation too that I get from you sharing your story, it's such a reciprocal sort of thing. And I love that
Yes.
flow. And so I'm learning so much about, well, like the gentleman that you spoke about, I don't know a whole lot about what happens in this thing. I'm still learning myself. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Well, I'm going to challenge everybody watching that if there are parts of Michelle's story that resonated with you, maybe gold nuggets that you are taking and that you're going to implement, or something that she said about something she learned, if you put those in the comments, I'm sure that Michelle will come back and interact. And
Absolutely.
and I think that that would be a nice confirmation for her vulnerability and for her sharing. So
Oh, that would be so
it
awesome.
would be
And hey,
fun.
yeah, and authenticity is where it's at. Even when it's hard to share those things, we're human. And so, if it helps somebody y- to become that authentic version of myself, that's where your best life is. So
That is
thank
where
you
your
for
best
allowing me
life
to be
is.
vulnerable in your
Well,
space.
Michelle, I want to thank you so much for, again, being vulnerable, for sharing these really sacred stories that are attached to you, and for what you're doing to help wake up the collective. I always say this, it is just so needed right now. I feel like this is the Great Awakening, and we're all a part of it. So thank you so much for your part in it.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.